I'm Jonas Szewiński and you're watching TVP World Talks, and we're going to be dealing with cybersecurity. With reports of election interference, cybercrime and information warfare, countries of the European Union are bracing for another wave of illicit and destabilizing efforts by hostile actors. Yet controlling the information space, not to mention ensuring election integrity, is a delicate balancing act, involving issues such as freedom of speech, the right to vote, and the very essence of what democracy is all about, namely choice. So what efforts can be made to prevent Russia and other autocracies from stealing our elections, while also making sure our own rights remain intact? Joining us now is Igor Protasowicki, cybersecurity expert from the Vistula University. Hello and welcome to TVP World. Would you agree with Poland's Digital Affairs Minister, Mr. Gawkowski, that we are essentially at war in the information and cyber realms with Russia? There are no tanks on the streets, but the proverbial tanks are already out there in cyberspace.
Well, war is a very harsh expression. Basically, we are at the verge, maybe. For sure, the situation is very intensive, and we have to be prepared for almost everything that can occur in the cyberspace.
And among the things that can happen, let's talk about election interference. There have been situations such as Moldova and later on Romania, quite controversial. Do you think this was essentially the right response? What was done essentially after the news of possible interference on a very large scale have emerged?
Unfortunately, yes, but I would turn this phrase a little bit, because it's not about what's going to happen, it's more about what's going on currently, because we are dealing with threats on a daily basis.
Now, I mean, of course, but our response has to be proportionate, right? Are we prepared to strike the right balance here?
I think yes, I believe that very, very strong, because our forces dedicated to fight and counter everything that bad is going on in the cyberspace are very well prepared, and they are dealing with it 24/7 on a daily basis. We are dealing with world-class specialists, and on the other end, we are dealing with sort of directed and undirected forms of attacks. Those undirected are just everywhere all day long. Those directed are getting stronger and stronger and are being targeted over currently political parties.
So Poland is claiming that 99% of these attacks are being thwarted, which is a great statistic. But let's come back to Romania for a second, because it is a subject of controversy, right? On the one hand, we have ample evidence that this was not something that should have happened. Essentially, a candidate has snowballed out of nowhere to massive numbers. There was evidence of accounts on TikTok being dormant for a long time, all of a sudden reactivated, spreading the same message. But some people are saying this was excessive. This guy should have been allowed to run. Should democracy, when seeing evidence of possible meddling, allow the whole thing to run its course, or was this intervention the right thing to do in that case?
We are living in an information-based society. So basically everything that happens in our environment, direct and indirect, is based on the flow of information, access to information, the speed this information is flowing with. We strongly depend on this information that is passed through social media. It's getting stronger and stronger every single year, basically, and the generations that participate in the elections are younger. So they were born and raised in this attitude towards the information. So we trust everything we read on the internet. Everything that happened in Romania, for example, was directed from many different causes, from many different directions. We in Poland, we should be prepared for that, and no reaction is too harsh.
Can we react fast enough, though? I mean, we've mentioned TikTok. This is a medium for people with a short attention span. There are quick messages there, couple of seconds, you scroll on. If it doesn't attract your attention, you just scroll on. But these things remain, right? It is probably unlikely that people scrolling through TikTok are going to pause and say, wait, was this correct? I will fact check. I will do like half an hour's research whether this sort of information is legitimate. Probably not, because we often emphasize we need to fact check things.
Individual users are not prepared to perform their own fact checking. This is why European Union emphasized this quality checking of every information that is passed through the specific services before they're being released and after they're being released. But the problem is...
Yet Meta, for example, says it's closing its fact-checking center because it wants to be in line with Trump's approach, i.e. Full freedom of speech, no restrictions.
Yes, but if it wants to be compatible with EU restrictions and EU regulations, it has to be provided at least on our soil, our ground. So the problem with fact-checking is it's social-based. So whoever is checking this information in this current moment, it may strongly depend on their beliefs and whoever they support.
And in some places, like on X, formerly known as Twitter, we actually do have grassroots movements, like NATO, for example, working to counter Russian narratives. But they are not present everywhere, right? For example, you don't have such a strong presence on TikTok, and also there is a different mechanism, different algorithms there. So would you say that we need to reevaluate this strategy in a fundamental way to respond quickly enough to threats which are coming at us, essentially at the speed of light, pretty much?
Well,
proverbially at least.
The fastest response possible would be by teaching the society, especially from the youngest generations, how to use internet in the wise way, how to understand information, how to divide what's true from what's wrong. Basically, in TikTok, we are closed in the information bubble. So as long as we use this media, the longer we do it, the more this media collects information about ourselves, about our characteristics, and it's just matching the best material ever just to satisfy us. So
self-perpetuating.
Exactly, and that makes this influence even stronger. So if we fall into this bubble again, it will be even harder to get out of it.
We also have AI. There were reports recently that Russia is deliberately flooding the information space with fake news so that the machine learning mechanisms would essentially suck up all these fake news articles and make them a part of its database, so essentially corrupting the AI. Would you say that we're prepared to deal with risks like that?
Yes, we used to think about AI as something very beneficial to us and something truthworthy. And unfortunately, these mechanisms are based on the large databases. They are being taught how to understand this information that is being collected. We, the users, are feeding it with information. And we had previous examples from the 12 or 15 years ago when Microsoft tried to create a Cortana version on the Twitter, I think, and after one day being
the racist chatbot, yes.
Exactly, that's the unfortunate outcome. And now we have to take under consideration the fact that everyone is able to create her own AI, feed it with their own information, and teach it how to prepare fake news in mass production.
So, in the light of all this, because naturally, as you said, artificial intelligence is not good or bad in itself. Basically, it uses the totality of human knowledge, and if you corrupt the database of human knowledge like that, well, you have these results. Now, there was recently an article in NATO Review, so it's a publication affiliated with NATO. It emphasizes risks stemming from what happened in Romania, but also said that we need a new approach. They called it, the author called it the Dynamic Information Resilience Framework, and mentioned a couple of steps, for example, the Resilience Narratives Task Force, so that would actually provide counter-narratives to fake news. Also, Threat Intelligence Hub to detect and dismantle these malicious networks. And finally, also hybrid threat escalation framework, which is interesting because that would involve NATO being prepared to act collectively, but beneath the threshold of Article 5.
Yes, and now we
against hybrid threats.
And now we have two different approaches: whether we should react to whatever wrong is going on the network around us, or we should prevent it. If we're talking about prevention, we should verify the information and the trends that are being found on the internet, just to cut off the sources. But then, if it's about reaction, we have to prepare the experts that are responsible for network content verification, for searching to the trending information, how to counter-inform people with the true information and correct whatever wrong was done to the society.
Now, also the question of reaction, right? I mean, it seems like it would be beneficial to have like further steps below Article 5, which would nevertheless involve a collective activity. But this is something for the future. But at this stage that we are now, do you think our elections in our region and Europe generally are safe from interference?
They're not 100% safe from interference. We should ask about our society, whether it is safe from interference.
Is it?
Yes, of course, I believe
Romania
the voters,
came close, right?
I believe that the voters can think for themselves. They collect information in a responsible way, and they make their choices based on the verified information. Majority of voters in Poland is basically of the older age, so they do not depend on the internet so strongly, and the youngest, who depend on TikTok and other social media, are not allowed to vote yet.
Well, yes, but this is poor consolation, right? These people will be entering their voting age soon. So would you say that there could be a window of opportunity for hostile actors there? Or because we often think of ourselves as being kind of like immune to Russian narratives because we have historical experiences, but in Hungary, for example, it didn't work.
Well, yes, and quite fortunately we have a minute or two to prepare them to enter this political stage and participate in the elections.
So education rather than, for example, smartphone bans, like Australia is banning smartphones for kids.
Or restrictions like China did with telling the youngest generations how long can you use social media, for example, a day or a week, or from the another approach, what sort of information can be passed to specific recipients.
So essentially, you need to obtain this knowledge on a gradual basis. Igor Protasowicki was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing.
My pleasure.
And I'm Jan Szelewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news and updates.